Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, looking out at the empty space around them. The ship was huge, over 3 kilometers long, and filled with technology that made other races scared. Jake had been the captain for 5 years now, and in that time, the Vengeance had become the most feared ship in the galaxy. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines. Jake liked it this way, the calm before the storm, as humans like to say. His crew of 2,800 people worked all through the massive ship, keeping everything running smoothly. They were the best of the best, handpicked from Earth's military academies. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Commander Amy Brooks from her position at the tactical station. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and quick hands. "We're getting a distress signal from the Kepler sector." Jake turned to face her. "What's the situation?" Amy's fingers moved fast over her controls, bringing up data on the main screen. "It's the human colony on Kepler 7. They're under attack by the Zephyrian. Empire's Third Fleet. The colonists are asking for immediate help." Jake nodded slowly. The Zephyrians were known across the galaxy for their crystal-based weapons and their love of conquest. They had been expanding their territory the past 50 years, taking over smaller worlds and enslaving the populations. Most alien races feared them, but humans had different ideas about fear. "How many ships are we looking at?" Jake asked as Amy checked her readings again. 47 destroyers, 12 heavy cruisers, and 3 command carriers. "It's a full invasion." "Force, Captain." The other officers on the bridge looked worried. That was enough firepower to destroy most fleets. Any normal ship would call for backup or retreat to a safe distance. But the USS Vengeance was not a normal ship, and Jake Morrison was not a normal captain. "Set course for Kepler 7, Jake ordered. "Maximum speed." Navigation Officer Pete Johnson looked up from his station. He was young, maybe 25, with blonde hair and nervous energy. "Captain, shouldn't we wait for reinforcements? That's a lot of ships." Jake smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had spotted easy prey. "Pete, how long have you been on this ship?" 6 months, sir." "Then you haven't seen what the Vengeance can do." "Amy, show him the records from our last 3 battles." Amy brought up the data on Pete's screen. His eyes grew wide as he read the numbers. In the Battle of Proxima, the Vengeance had destroyed 200 enemy ships by itself. At the Vega incident, they had made an entire alien fleet surrender without firing a single shot. The Battle of the Outer Rim had lasted only 12 minutes, and when it was over, nothing was left of the enemy but floating debris. "How is that possible?" Pete whispered. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez laughed from his station near the back of the bridge. He was a big man with dark hair and hands that were always dirty from working on the ship's engines. "Kid, this ship runs on technology that would make other races cry. We've got weapons they can't understand and shields they can't break. The Vengeance is not just a ship. It's a nightmare made real." Jake walked over to the main view screen, where the stars streaked past as they jumped to hyperspace. "Pete, let me tell you something about fear. Most alien races, they think logically. They see a threat, they calculate the odds, they make a plan. But humans, we do things differently. We take risks that others think are impossible. We break rules that others think are sacred. And when we win so completely that our enemies tell stories about us to scare their children." The ship shook slightly as they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. On the main screen, they could see the planet Kepler 7. In the distance, surrounded by the dark shapes of Zephyrian warships, the colony cities on the planet's surface were burning. "Sir," Amy reported, "the Zephyrians have detected us. They're moving into defensive formation." Jake could see the enemy. Ships on the tactical display. They were arranging themselves in a perfect sphere around the planet, with the command carriers at the center and the smaller ships forming protective layers around them. It was a good formation, one that had worked for them many times before. "Open a channel to the lead Zephyrian ship," Jake ordered. The main screen changed to show the bridge of an alien vessel. The Zephyrian admiral was tall and thin, with purple skin and 4 arms. His name was Klex, according to the ship's computer, and he had conquered 17 worlds for his empire. "Human ship," Admiral Klex said in his mechanical-sounding voice. "You are outnumbered 62 to 1. Retreat now, and we will let you live." Jake stepped forward so the alien could see him clearly. "Admiral Klex, I am Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Vengeance. I'm here to give you one chance to surrender and leave this system peacefully." Klex's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. Then he began to laugh, a sound like grinding metal. "One ship against my entire fleet? Human, your species. Reputation for insanity is well deserved. We will destroy you, then finish with the colonists." "Amy," Jake said quietly, not taking his eyes off the alien admiral, "charge all weapons. Danny, bring the special systems online. Pete, plot us a course straight through the center of their formation." Pete's hands shook as he entered the commands. "Sir, that's suicide." Jake finally looked away from the screen, and when he did, his smile was wider than before. "Pete, let me tell you the first rule about serving on the Vengeance. What looks like suicide to everyone else is just another Tuesday for us." The connection to the Zephyrian ship ended, and the bridge fell silent except for the growing hum of the ship's weapons charging. On the tactical display, Jake could see the enemy ships moving closer together, trying to concentrate their firepower. They thought they were being smart, but they had no idea what was coming. "All hands, this is the captain," Jake announced over the ship's communication system. "We have Zephyrian forces attacking human colonists. They think their numbers give them an advantage. They're about to learn why the entire galaxy fears the name Vengeance. Battle stations." The lights on the bridge dimmed to red, and Jake could feel the ship's massive engines building power. In a few minutes, the Zephyrians would understand why even the strongest alien fleets dreaded this human warship. 3 years earlier, Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez had been working in the deep levels of the USS Vengeance when the call came in. The ship was still new then, fresh from the secret shipyards of Mars, and most of the crew didn't understand what they were really flying in. Danny remembered that day clearly as he explained it to the new crew members who had joined after the Kepler incident. They sat in the main engineering bay, surrounded by machines that hummed with power from 12 different alien civilizations. The technology looked wrong somehow, like pieces from different puzzles forced together by human stubbornness and genius. "You want to know why other races are scared of us?" Danny asked the group of young engineers. "Let me tell you about Proxima Station." The Battle of Proxima Station had been the Vengeance's first real test. The Korthic Empire had invaded human space with over 200 ships, confident that their superior numbers would crush any resistance. They were reptilian creatures, cold and calculating, who had conquered dozens of worlds through careful planning and overwhelming force. Danny pulled up the old battle records on his display screen. The images showed the massive Korthic fleet arranged in perfect formation, their dark ships bristling with plasma cannons and energy shields. Against them stood the single human vessel, looking tiny and helpless. Captain Morrison did something that day that no alien commander would ever consider, Danny continued. He ordered us to ram the enemy flagship at near light speed. The new engineers looked shocked. A young woman named Katie Phillips raised her hand. "But that would destroy our ship too, wouldn't it?" Danny grinned. "That's what the Korthics thought. See, they don't understand human engineering. We don't just build things to work. We build them to work in ways that should be impossible." He activated another display showing the technical readouts from that battle. "Our shield harmonics can be tuned to match any frequency. When we hit the Korthic flagship, our shields didn't just protect us. They turned their own energy weapons against them. The impact destroyed their command ship and sent feedback through their entire fleet's communication network. But the ramming attack was only the beginning. As the Korthic fleet tried to regroup, the Vengeance had done something even more impossible. It had split into multiple copies of itself, each one attacking a different part of the enemy formation. "Holographic projectors?" asked another engineer. "Better than that," Danny replied. "Quantum displacement fields. We actually existed in multiple dimensions at the same time. Each copy was real enough to fire weapons and take damage, but if one got destroyed, we could just shift our consciousness to another copy. The Cortex had fought bravely, but they were fighting an enemy that didn't follow the rules of physics as they understood them. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Weapons that should have missed found their targets anyway. By the end of the battle, the proud Korthak fleet was nothing but floating wreckage. Dr. Lisa Taylor entered the engineering bay as Danny was finishing his story. She was the ship's xenobiologist, an expert on alien psychology and behavior. Her job was to understand how other races thought, so the crew could better predict their actions in battle. "Are you telling them about Proxima again?" she asked with a smile. "They need to understand," Danny replied. "These kids think we're just another warship." Lisa nodded and turned to address the young engineers. "What Danny isn't telling you is the effect that battle had on the Korthak survivors. I interviewed several of them after we took them prisoner. They couldn't accept what they had seen. Some insisted they had fought against 100 human ships. Not one. Others claimed we had used some kind of mind control to make them see things that weren't there." She pulled up her own files, showing brain scans and psychological profiles of alien prisoners. The Korthak mind is built for logical thinking. They understand cause and effect, action and reaction. But humans fight in ways that break their understanding of how the universe works. To them, we might as well be demons or gods. The second major battle had been against the Ethereal Collective, a race of energy beings who thought they were superior to all physical life forms. They had attacked a human research station, confident that their ability to phase through solid matter made them unbeatable. They had not counted on human stubbornness. "Captain Morrison ordered me to reverse the polarity on our dimensional stabilizers," Danny explained. "Instead of keeping us locked in normal space, we could phase shift just like the ethereals, but we did it better." The human boarding parties had materialized directly inside the ethereal command ships, appearing on their bridges like ghosts made solid. The ethereals, who had never faced an enemy that could match their phasing abilities, panicked completely. They surrendered within hours, begging the humans not to steal their souls. "That's the key to understanding our reputation," Lisa added. "It's not just that we win battles, it's how we win them. We do things that other races think are impossible, and when they try to figure out how we did it, they can't. So they start to believe we can do anything." The most recent battle before Kepler had been against the Vorthan Republic. The Vorthans were traders and diplomats, usually peaceful, but they had made the mistake of selling weapons to human enemies. Captain Morrison had decided to send a message. The Vengeance had appeared in the middle of their capital system without any warning. One moment, the space around their homeworld was empty. The next moment, a 3-kilometer-long warship was floating above their biggest city. "How did we get past their sensor networks?" Katie asked. "We didn't," Danny replied. "We were there the whole time. We just existed in a temporal loop, experiencing the same moment over and over until we decided to make ourselves visible." The Vorthans had immediately tried to call for help from their allies, but their communication systems had stopped working. Every message they sent was replaced by the same simple text: "The USS Vengeance is here. Surrender now." "We hacked their entire planetary network in about 3 minutes, Danny continued. "Not with computers, but with trained dolphins carrying quantum processors." The engineers stared at him. "Dolphins?" "Humans will use anything that works," Lisa explained. "We've trained dolphins to navigate through digital networks because their brains process information in ways that alien computer security can't understand." Or blocked. To the Vorthans, it looked like their most secure systems were being invaded by the thoughts of sea creatures. The Vorthans had surrendered without a single shot being fired. They agreed to stop selling weapons to human enemies and paid reparations for the damage their weapons had caused. But more importantly, they spread the story of what had happened to them. Now every race in the galaxy knows what the Vengeance can do, Lisa concluded. "We don't just win battles. We win them in ways that make no sense to anyone else." They tell stories about us that get more frightening with each telling. Danny shut down the displays and looked at the group of young engineers. That's why Admiral Klex was so confident when he saw us at Kepler. He thought he had studied our tactics, learned our weaknesses. He had no idea that everything he knew about us was just the beginning. What do you mean? Katie asked Danny, and Lisa exchanged a look. There were things about the Vengeance that even most of the crew didn't know about. Weapons and systems so dangerous that they were kept secret from almost everyone. Let's just say, Danny replied, that everything we've done so far has been us holding back. The real scary stuff is still locked away, waiting for the day when we really need it. As the engineers filed out of the bay, Lisa stayed behind with Danny. They both knew what was coming. The battles at Proxima against the Ethereals and with the Vorthons had been victories, but they had also made the Vengeance too many enemies. Other races were starting to work together, sharing information about human tactics and developing countermeasures. How long do you think we have before they try to gang up on us? Lisa asked. Danny checked his instruments, reading the quantum signatures from the ship's most classified systems. Captain Morrison thinks maybe 6 months. After that, we'll either have to reveal our real capabilities or watch the galaxy unite against us, Lisa nodded. She had been studying the psychological profiles of the major alien races, and the pattern was clear. Fear was turning into desperation, and desperate enemies did dangerous things. The USS Vengeance had become exactly what its builders intended, the most feared warship in the galaxy. But fear was a two-edged sword, and soon it would cut both ways. The USS Vengeance moved toward the Zephyrian fleet like a dark arrow cutting through space. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center of his bridge, watching the enemy ships arrange themselves into what they thought was an unbreakable formation. 62 ships against 1? In any normal battle, those odds would mean certain death for the smaller force, but Jake Morrison had stopped fighting normal battles a long time ago. Distance to enemy fleet? He asked. Navigation Officer Pete Johnson checked his readings. 2 million kilometers and closing, Captain. They're holding formation around the planet. Jake nodded. The Zephyrians were doing exactly what he expected. Admiral Klex was a traditional commander who believed in the power of superior numbers and defensive positions. He had probably studied every battle the Vengeance had ever fought, looking for patterns and weaknesses to exploit. What Klex didn't understand was that humans didn't repeat the same tactics twice. Amy, what's our weapons status? Lieutenant Commander. Amy Brooks ran her hands over her tactical controls. All primary weapons charged and ready, Captain. Soul cannon at full power. Secondary systems are online and waiting for your orders. The Soul Cannon was the Vengeance's main weapon, a device that contained the concentrated energy of a miniature star. Most races thought it was impossible to contain that much power in a single weapon, but human engineers had found a way to compress stellar plasma into focused beams that could cut through any known material. Danny, how are our special systems? Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez grinned from his station. The adaptive camouflage is ready to go, Captain. Dimensional anchors are fully charged. And the nanobots are just waiting to make some new friends. Jake smiled back. The adaptive camouflage was one of his favorite toys. It combined human stealth technology with cloaking devices stolen from 6 different alien races, creating something that was better than any of them individually. To enemy sensors, the Vengeance could appear as multiple smaller ships, or as a harmless cargo vessel, or sometimes as nothing at all. Activate camouflage, Jake ordered. Make us look like a standard patrol cruiser. On the enemy tactical displays, the massive 3-kilometer warship suddenly appeared to shrink to 1/10 of its actual size. The Zephyrian fleet commanders would see what looked like a single human patrol ship charging directly toward their formation. They would think the humans had sent a sacrifice to buy time for the colonists to escape. They would be very wrong. Sir, Pete called out, the Zephyrians are adjusting their formation. They're concentrating firepower on our approach vector. Perfect, Jake replied. They're doing exactly what I want them to do. Amy, launch fighters. Commander Helen Carter had been waiting for that order. From the Vengeance's massive fighter bays, dozens of small crafts streamed out into space, but these weren't ordinary fighters. Each one was equipped with dimensional anchor technology that could lock onto enemy ships and drag them into unstable pockets of space-time. The Zephyrian commanders saw the fighters approaching and ordered their own interceptors to engage. It seemed like a normal fighter battle, the kind that happened in every space conflict. The aliens had no way of knowing that each human fighter carried weapons that could make enemy ships simply disappear from reality. Helen's pilots are in position, Captain, Amy reported. Enemy fighters are moving to intercept. Tell her to begin Phase 1. Jake ordered. The human fighters engaged the Zephyrian interceptors in what looked like standard combat. Energy beams flashed back and forth, and several ships on both sides exploded in bright flashes. But then something impossible happened. A group of Zephyrian fighters simply vanished, leaving behind empty space where they had been flying just seconds before. Admiral Klex's voice crackled over the communication system. What happened to Squadron 7? Where did they go? His tactical officers had no answer. The human fighters had somehow made 12 enemy ships disappear without leaving any wreckage behind. The Zephyrian pilots began to panic, not knowing if they were fighting an enemy they could even hurt. Distance to main fleet? Jake asked. 1 million kilometers, Pete reported. They're charging their primary weapons. Jake could see the enemy ships on his display screen, their crystal-based energy cannons glowing with building power. The Zephyrians were confident that once the human ship got within range, their concentrated firepower would destroy it in seconds. Amy, target their command carrier with the Soul Cannon. Full power. Amy's fingers danced over her controls, bringing the massive weapon to bear on the largest Zephyrian ship. Target locked, Captain. Soul Cannon ready to fire. Fire, the space around the Vengeance lit up as the Soul Cannon discharged. A beam of concentrated stellar plasma, bright as a small sun, lanced out across the battlefield. It struck the Zephyrian command carrier dead center, and the massive alien ship simply ceased to exist. The plasma beam continued through the enemy formation, cutting through 6 heavy cruisers like they were made of paper. The silence that followed was complete. 7 of the most powerful ships in the Zephyrian fleet had been destroyed with a single shot, and the remaining crews couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Impossible, Admiral Klex whispered over the open channel. No weapon can generate that much power. Jake opened a communication link to the Zephyrian flagship. Admiral, you're fighting the USS Vengeance. The impossible is what we do for breakfast. All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel, Klex ordered. Destroy it now. The remaining Zephyrian ships opened fire with everything they had. Hundreds of energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked toward the Vengeance, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But when the barrage reached the human ship, something strange happened. The weapons passed right through the Vengeance as if it wasn't there. Phase shift active, Danny reported calmly. We're existing in normal space and subspace at the same time. Their weapons can't lock onto our quantum signature. While the enemy weapons passed harmlessly through their ship, the Vengeance's secondary systems went to work. Thousands of nanobots, each one smaller than a grain of sand, streamed out from the human vessel and spread across the battlefield. They were self-replicating machines, designed to convert any material they touched into more nanobots. The first Zephyrian ship they reached was a destroyer on the edge of the formation. Within minutes, its hull plating began to change color and texture. What had been smooth purple metal became rough gray material that pulsed with energy. Sir, the destroyer's captain reported to Admiral Klex, our hull is transforming into some kind of weapon system. We're losing control of our ship. Other Zephyrian vessels began reporting the same problem. The nanobots were spreading from ship to ship, converting their own hulls into energy cannons that turned against the fleet. Soon, half the Zephyrian ships were firing on their own allies, controlled by the tiny machines that had infected their systems. This is madness, Klex shouted. How can they make our own ships fight against us? Jake watched the chaos on his tactical display with satisfaction. The nanobots were one of his favorite weapons because they turned the enemy's strength against them. The more ships the aliens brought to a battle, the more weapons the nanobots had to work with. Amy, are there any ships still under Zephyrian control? 15 destroyers and 3 cruisers, Captain. They're trying to retreat. Can't have that, Jake said. Pete, plot intercept courses for all retreating vessels. Pete looked at his navigation computer and frowned. Sir, they're running in different directions. We can't catch them all. Watch and learn, Jake replied. Danny, activate the quantum displacement drive. Danny's hands moved over his engineering controls, bringing online one of the Vengeance's most closely guarded secrets. The ship began to glow with an eerie blue light as its quantum field generators spun up to full power. Suddenly, there were multiple copies of the USS Vengeance scattered across the battlefield. Each one was solid and real, capable of independent action. The retreating Zephyrian ships found themselves facing a human warship in every direction they tried to run. How many ships are there? A Zephyrian captain asked over the radio. It doesn't matter, Admiral Klex replied, his voice hollow. With defeat. 1 or 100, we cannot fight an enemy that breaks the laws of physics. The remaining Zephyrian ships stopped trying to run and simply drifted in space, their crews too shocked to continue fighting. They had been defeated not by superior numbers or better weapons, but by technology. That made no sense according to everything they knew about the universe. Jake opened a channel to the entire enemy fleet. This is Captain Morrison. Your fleet is defeated. I'm giving you one chance to surrender and leave this system. If you refuse, I'll show you what the Vengeance can really do when we stop holding back. Admiral Klex appeared on the main screen, his forearms trembling with exhaustion and fear. Behind him, Jake could see Zephyrian officers staring at their instruments in confusion and terror. We surrender, Klex said quietly. But tell me, human, how is it possible for one ship to defeat an entire fleet? Jake leaned back in his captain's chair and smiled. Admiral, you made the same mistake that everyone makes when they fight us. You assumed we follow the same rules you do. But humans don't play by other people's rules. We make our own. The battle was over, but Jake knew this was only the beginning. Word of this defeat would spread across the galaxy, and soon every major 3 months after the battle at Kepler 7, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his private quarters aboard the USS Vengeance, reading intelligence reports that made his blood run cold. The victory over Admiral Klex's fleet had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, but not in the way he had hoped. Instead of discouraging attacks on human colonies, the demonstration of the Vengeance's power had done something much worse. It had unified the galaxy's major powers against humanity. A soft chime indicated someone was at his door. Enter, Jake called out. Dr. Lisa Taylor stepped into the room, carrying a datapad filled with psychological profiles and analysis reports. Her usually cheerful expression was replaced by deep concern. Captain, we need to talk about the prisoners from the Zephyrian fleet, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Jake set down his own reports and gave her his full attention. What's the problem, Lisa? I've been conducting interviews with the captured Zephyrian officers, trying to understand their mental state after the battle. What I found is disturbing. She activated her datapad, showing brain scans and psychological evaluations. Captain, these aliens aren't just defeated. They're traumatized in ways I've never seen before. Some of them refuse to believe they fought against a single ship. Others insist that humans have learned to control reality itself. Jake studied the medical data. The brain scans showed patterns of activity that indicated severe psychological stress. Some of the Zephyrian prisoners showed signs of complete mental breakdown. They keep asking me the same questions, Lisa continued. How do humans make ships disappear? How do you exist in multiple places at once? How do you turn our own weapons against us? When I try to explain our technology, they think I'm lying or trying to drive them insane. What about Admiral Klex? Lisa's expression grew even more troubled. He's the worst case. He spends most of his time staring at the walls of his cell, muttering about reality breakers and demons from the void. He's convinced that humans aren't a natural species. That we must have been created by some cosmic force to punish other races for their sins. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had known that the Vengeance's capabilities would frighten other species, but he hadn't considered the deeper psychological impact. Fear was one thing, but what Lisa was describing sounded more like religious terror. There's something else, Lisa added. The prisoners have been sharing their experiences with each other, and they're creating a kind of mythology around our ship. They call the Vengeance the ship that breaks heaven and believe that encountering it marks a soul for eternal damnation. Before Jake could respond, his communication system activated. "Captain Morrison to the bridge immediately," came Amy's urgent voice. Jake and Lisa hurried to the bridge, where they found the crew gathered around the main tactical display. Commander Amy Brooks looked up as they entered. "Captain, we've been monitoring alien communication networks across the sector. You need to see this." The main screen lit up with intercepts from dozens of different alien species. Jake recognized the languages of the Korthic Empire, the Ethereal Collective, the Vorthan Republic, and many others. What he heard made his heart sink. "The human warship must be stopped," said a Korthic general. "It threatens the natural order of the universe." "We agree," replied an ethereal commander. "Our seers have prophesied that this vessel will bring about the end of all organized civilization. The Trilateral Pact is prepared to commit our entire combined fleet," added a Vorthan admiral. 3,000 ships, if necessary." Communications Officer Retta Morgan turned from her station. "Captain, they're not just planning a military response. They're calling it a holy war against humanity. They believe we've become an existential threat to all life in the galaxy." Jake sank into his captain's chair, the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. What had started as a mission to protect human colonies had turned into something much larger and more dangerous. "How long do we have?" he asked. Amy checked her tactical computers. "Based on their fleet movements, maybe 6 months before they're ready to move against us. They're pulling ships from every corner of their territories." Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez spoke up from his station. "Captain, we've got another problem. I've been analyzing the quantum resonance patterns from our recent battles, and we're starting to attract attention from other things." "What kind of other things?" Danny's hands moved nervously over his controls. "Our use of dimensional technology is creating ripples in space-time. There are entities that exist in the spaces between dimensions, and they're starting to notice us. Some of them might not be friendly." Dr. Frank Phillips, the ship's chief medical officer, stepped forward. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke unless asked, but his expression was grave. "Captain, I need to report on the psychological state of our own crew." Jake felt another chill. "What's wrong?" "The crew is showing signs of increasing stress and moral conflict," Phillips explained. "Many of them are struggling with the knowledge that our ship has become a symbol of terror across the galaxy. They joined the military to protect humanity, not to become the monsters in other species' nightmares." Jake looked around the bridge at his officers. They were good people, the best humanity had to offer, but he could see the strain in their faces. The weight of being the galaxy's most feared warriors was taking its toll. Chief Security Officer Karen Walsh activated her personal data pad. "Captain, I've been monitoring communications from Earth Command. There's growing debate about whether the Vengeance program should continue." She transferred her data to the main screen, showing political discussions and military reports from the human homeworld. Jake read through the documents with growing alarm. "Some officials are arguing that our reputation is becoming a liability," Karen continued. "They're concerned that the Vengeance is making too many enemies and pushing the galaxy toward a war that humanity can't win. But others are saying we need to build more ships like the Vengeance," Amy added. "They want an entire fleet of reality-breaking warships." Jake stood and walked to the front of the bridge, looking out at the stars. Somewhere among those points of light, 3,000 enemy ships were preparing to hunt down and destroy his vessel. The thought should have frightened him, but instead he felt a strange sense of anticipation. "Karen, what's our current location relative to the galactic core?" Karen checked her navigation computers. We're about 15,000 light-years from the center, in a relatively empty sector of space. Good, that gives us room to maneuver, Jake turned back to his crew. I want everyone to understand something. The aliens out there are right to be afraid of us. We have become something new in this galaxy, something that doesn't fit into their understanding of how the universe works. He paused, making eye contact with each of his officers. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. For too long, the major powers have divided up the galaxy among themselves, enslaving smaller species and crushing anyone who tried to resist. They've created a system based on fear and oppression. And now they're afraid of us, Amy said quietly. Exactly. For the first time in galactic history, the bullies are facing someone they can't intimidate or defeat through conventional means. They're calling it a holy war because they can't accept that there might be someone stronger than them. Danny raised his hand. Captain, what about the crew's morale problems? Dr. Phillips is right that people are struggling with what we've become. Jake nodded. I know. And I won't lie to any of you. The path we're on leads to darker places than any of us imagined when we first set out. But sometimes, to protect the innocent, you have to become something that frightens the guilty. Lisa stepped forward. Jake, the psychological profiles I've compiled suggest that we're not just changing how other species see us, we're changing how we see ourselves. The crew is starting to think of humans as fundamentally different from other life forms. Maybe we are, Jake replied. 6 months later, the USS Vengeance drifted silently in the space near the Andromeda Gateway, a massive structure that connected distant parts of the galaxy through folded space-time. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching the largest fleet in galactic history emerge from hyperspace. 3,000 ships spread out before them in perfect formation. The combined forces of the Korthic Empire, Ethereal Collective, Vorthan Republic, and dozens of smaller powers had united for a single purpose: to destroy the human warship that had become the galaxy's greatest fear. Captain, Lieutenant Commander. Amy Brooks reported from her tactical station. Enemy fleet is taking position. They're maintaining a distance of 5 million kilometers and deploying what looks like some kind of energy field around our position. Jake nodded, unsurprised. They've learned from our previous battles. What kind of field are we looking at, Danny? Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez studied his readings carefully. It's a combination of quantum inhibitors, gravitational anchors, and reality stabilizers, Captain. They're trying to lock us into normal physics. No dimensional phasing, no quantum displacement, no reality manipulation. Clever, Jake admitted. They've been studying our tactics and developed countermeasures. Amy, what's our weapon status? All conventional systems are online, but the field is interfering with our special technologies. Soul Cannon is functioning, but at reduced power. Fighter deployment is possible, but their dimensional anchors won't work in this environment. Jake walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the massive enemy fleet. In the center of the formation, he could see the flagship of Supreme Commander Vexstar, leader of the Korthic Empire and the alien officer chosen to coordinate this historic alliance. Open a channel to their command ship, Jake ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of the alien flagship. Supreme Commander Vexstar was an impressive figure, nearly 3 meters tall with scaled skin and 4 arms. Behind him stood representatives from each of the major powers in the alliance. Captain Morrison, Vexstar said in his deep mechanical voice, you are trapped within our containment field. Your reality-breaking technologies cannot function here. Surrender now, and we will grant you and your crew a quick death. Jake smiled, and it was not the kind smile of a diplomat. It was the Predator's grin that had become famous across the galaxy. Supreme Commander, you've gone to a lot of trouble to hunt down one human ship. I'm flattered. Your vessel has become a threat to the natural order of the universe, replied an ethereal representative, its energy form flickering with anger. Your species violates the fundamental laws that govern civilized space. We have spent months studying your tactics, added a Vorthan admiral. We know how you phase through solid matter, how you exist in multiple locations simultaneously, how you turn our own weapons against us. Our containment field prevents all of these abilities, Jake nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right. Everything you've seen us do before won't work in your energy field. You've effectively neutralized our conventional special abilities. Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed with suspicion. Then you surrender? Not exactly, Jake replied. You see, you've made the same mistake that everyone makes when they fight humans. You assume that what you've seen us do represents the limits of our capabilities. He turned to Danny. Chief, how are the Omega protocol systems? Danny's hands moved over his engineering controls and his face lit up with excitement. All systems are green, Captain. The containment field actually helps us because it provides a stable space-time framework for the really exotic stuff. Jake turned back to the alien commanders on his screen. Gentlemen, ladies, energy beings, and assorted other life forms, you're about to learn why the USS Vengeance became a legend. What you've seen us do in previous battles was us holding back. Today you get to see what happens when humans stop playing nice. Vextar's scales shifted color with what might have been fear. What are you talking about? Danny, activate Protocol Omega, full authorization. The bridge lights dimmed as massive amounts of power flowed through the ship's systems. Deep in the engineering sections, devices that had never been used in combat came online for the first time. The Vengeance began to glow with an eerie light that seemed to bend the space around it. Captain, Amy reported, her voice filled with wonder, I'm reading energy signatures I've never seen before. It's like the ship is drawing power from ... everywhere. Jake nodded. The Omega systems don't just use the ship's reactors. They tap directly into the zero-point energy field that underlies all of space-time. We're drawing power from the quantum vacuum itself. On the alien ships, sensor operators were reporting readings that made no sense. The human vessel wasn't just generating energy, it was creating energy from nothing, violating the fundamental law of conservation that governed all known physics. Supreme Commander Vextar's voice came over the communication channel. No longer. Confident. Impossible. No technology can create energy from empty space. Supreme Commander, Jake replied, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Danny, show them what human engineering can really do. The space around the USS Vengeance began to change. Reality itself seemed to ripple and bend as the ship's Omega systems reached full power. The contained singularity at the ship's core, a miniature black hole that humanity had somehow tamed and weaponized, began to interact with the quantum fields in ways that defied every known law of physics. Captain, Navigation Officer Pete Johnson called out, his voice shaking with excitement, we're not just existing in normal space anymore. The sensors show we're occupying multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Jake looked at the tactical display and smiled. Where there had been one USS Vengeance, there were now dozens. Each one was real, solid, and capable of independent action. But these weren't the quantum displacement copies they had used before. These were manifestations of the ship existing in parallel dimensions, all of them brought into normal space. By the power of the controlled singularity. How many ships are there? Asked a panicked Korthik officer over the open channel. All of them, Jake replied. Every possible version of the USS Vengeance that could exist in any parallel reality is now here with us. You wanted to fight one human ship? Congratulations. You get to fight an infinite number of human ships. The alien fleet opened fire with every weapon they had. Thousands of energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked toward the human vessels. Enough firepower to destroy entire planets. But as the weapons reached their targets, something impossible happened. The attacks were absorbed by the Vengeance fleet and converted into additional copies of the ship. Energy-to-matter conversion on a macro scale, Danny explained cheerfully. Every shot they fire gives us the raw materials to create more versions of ourselves. The harder they fight, the more of us there are. Supreme Commander Vextar watched in horror as his carefully planned attack turned into a nightmare beyond his worst fears. The Alien Alliance had brought 3,000 ships to destroy one human vessel. But now they faced an enemy fleet that grew larger with every shot they fired. "Cease fire," Vexstar ordered. "All ships, cease fire immediately." But it was too late. The quantum cascade had begun, and the USS Vengeance was replicating itself across multiple dimensions faster than the alien computers could count. Soon there were hundreds of the massive human warships, then thousands, then tens of thousands. "This is madness," whispered an ethereal commander. "They're not breaking our understanding of physics. They're breaking physics-self." Jake opened a channel to the entire alien fleet. "This is Captain Jake Morrison, speaking for all versions of the USS Vengeance across all possible realities. You came here to destroy us because you feared what we represented. You were right to fear us." The alien ships hung motionless in space, their crews too shocked to respond. They had prepared for battle against an enemy that used unconventional tactics, but they had never imagined facing an opponent that could rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. "We are not like you," Jake continued. "We don't accept limits, we don't bow to authority. We don't believe that some species are naturally superior to others. And when you try to force us back into the boxes you've built for us, we break those boxes and build something better." One by one, the alien ships began to retreat. The carefully planned formation fell apart as individual commanders decided that no victory was worth facing an enemy that could multiply infinitely. Within hours, the largest fleet in galactic history had scattered across dozens of star systems, carrying with them stories that would be told for generations. "Supreme Commander Vexstar," Jake called out as the Korthic flagship prepared to jump to hyperspace. "I want you to remember this moment. Remember what happens when the galaxy's bullies try to gang up on someone who refuses to be intimidated." Vexstar S. Final transmission was broadcast across all frequencies, ensuring that every species in the galaxy would hear his words. "The human warship, Vengeance, is not bound by the laws that govern the rest of us. It exists beyond our understanding of what is possible. Avoid it at all costs. Some enemies cannot be defeated because they refuse to accept the concept of defeat." As the last alien ship disappeared into hyperspace, Jake stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by thousands of copies of himself from parallel re